From Barangaroo Studios, the AusBiz COB is the key stuff you need to know about the day in business and finance.
Hello and welcome to the COB on this Monday. I'm Andrew Gagan. Thanks for joining us, both listening and watching here at AusBiz. So let's take a look at the market. Well, not a bad way to start the week. Very positive start, in fact. Looks as though we're going to end up close to the session highs there, up around 0.8% on the CIBO 200. Sector-wise, all in the green aside from tech. And that's because of one stock in particular, WiseTech. We will get to that in just a moment. But just in terms of today's themes, well, the golden age, it is here. It is all about gold at the moment, having hit another record on Friday, pushing all those gold stocks higher today as a result. A lot of bullish forecasts in terms of gold at this point. Not so wise. Well, that would apply to that tech stock in particular. I'm talking about WiseTech, which has tumbled today. A lot of this to do with the founder and chief executive, Richard White, and details of his personal life, essentially, and how it may impact the company in terms of a payout. And China cuts. It's tackled its prime loan rates again, the 1 and the 5 year. Further cuts there to add to that stimulus that we've already seen in China. All right, so let's have a look at those sectors in particular. I mentioned tech. It is the one in the red that has finished the day, and it's all because of that stock, WiseTech Global, down more than 14%. Elsewhere, the miners did well today, particularly the larger miners there, although South32 came off after reporting. Mineral Resources, another stock with controversy swirling around its founder and chief executive there, Chris Ellison, just in regards to some tax that he may have neglected to pay. And energy, they're all positive today, led by Beatrice, up more than 3%. So let's check in with our top stories. And WiseTech plunging after the board said it was reviewing allegations against the founder and chief executive, Richard White, by a former partner, which resulted in him paying her millions of dollars to settle the matter. WiseTech saying it was seeking further information and taking external advice, but clearly the market unsettled by what's going on at the top. Similarly, with Mineral Resources, shares down a similar amount, as the board said it had full confidence in Managing Director Chris Ellison following an investigation by the Australian Financial Review that uncovered how he allegedly evaded tax for years. It's engaged external legal counsel to look into the matter and advise the board. Elsewhere, Nick Scali falling around 5% after a warn that higher freight rates would hit its gross profit margin. In a trading update, the retailer forecasting net profit for Australia and New Zealand to be in the range of between $30 and $33 million in the first half. And South32 posting a sharp fall in first quarter manganese output, with its Australian operations on hold in terms of recovery from a cyclone. And it logged 597,000 wet metric tonnes of manganese for the quarter to the end of September, down from 1.5 million a year earlier. All right, well, let's get across those market movements, what we should be watching out for. And to do that, we're joined by Mathan Somasundaram from Deep Data Analytics. Mathan, long time no speak. In fact, for those that missed it, you were our expert on the call today. So, and we were talking about that on the call, just where markets are at the moment, momentum we're seeing. How would you sum it up? I guess particularly what we're seeing in gold at the moment.
Yeah, it's a weird market, isn't it? I mean, the usual correlations are not working. We're getting things that are moving non-correlated. We got bond yields going up. We got equity markets going up, and it's been driven in Australia by banks predominantly, and in the US by techs predominantly, and that continues. And so everyone's kind of waiting for something to happen. And most of the central banks are looking at rate cuts. But the interesting part is even after a number of cuts like in Canada or in New Zealand, even in ECB, the real rates in all of those regions are still higher than Australia, and we haven't even started our cuts. So it's a weird situation. So, but I think what the bond market is saying is that things are flagging that there's potential risk of another inflation cycle, and gold is moving on the similar hedge on the currency risk and inflation risk. So I think equities is being positive, where the bond market and gold is telling you to be pessimistic. So you have to balance both sides.
Gee, it doesn't make it easy, does it? Nonetheless, as you were saying, if you're in gold, happy days for now at least. What are you making of those updates we're getting both in the US and also here in Australia? Obviously, we're in the midst of third quarter US earnings season, and locally, of course, AGM season.
Yeah, the US ones are a bit tricky. Statistically speaking, you get like about 85 to 90% beat. I mean, basically in the US, if you're not beating the numbers, you've got problems. So pretty much everyone beats. It's the question of how good the beat is. On a global basis, what we've seen in the recent rally back has been purely multiple expansion. So if you look at the major techs, most of the major techs have delivered, relative to expectations, multiple downgrades, but the stock prices are at all-time highs. So there's something that doesn't quite add up. So you have to have some kind of reality check. So we pay a higher multiple because we assume that the growth rate will catch up and that'll even it out, and we normalize multiple over time. But what we're finding is, in most cases, growth rates are still sliding, but multiples are expanding. So it doesn't last too long in that kind of environment. So you have to be careful in your exposures. You have to diversify your holdings and have a bit more risk management in play, because we are going into a US election. There's a lot of uncertainty attached to it. What happens afterwards is going to be, it's going to be a fascinating question how this plays out. So, because at the moment, the only reason we are having low oil price is because the US is dumping strategic reserve on the oil market. So will they be doing that afterwards? So all of these questions, nobody really knows the answer. So we're going to be waiting to see how this plays out.
Nathan, let's get stock specific. A couple of stocks really on the move today for the wrong reasons, essentially. One of them is our stock of the day. We'll get to that in a moment. Let's then begin with WiseTech. And we were talking about this on the call, that the bad news begets bad news. Mind you, this issue, this personal issue that the founder, Richard White, has had, has been around for quite some time. Why have we suddenly seen the stock fall?
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, no one can say they didn't know this was coming. Everyone knew. And management, and this is where I've got issues with what the board gets paid for, in a lot of these companies, because when these things are getting blown around, the boards don't do anything unless they're forced to. And it's one of those cozy relationships that you have with management and boards. The boards are there to keep management in track, and all of these should have been addressed. And the board should have, when the market starts to worry, the board should be delivering updates, clarifying where they are, what they checked, and all of those things. And in a number of these cases, they're not doing that. They're not providing enough clarity. The market doesn't trust them. So where we are in that scenario, I think WiseTech is a really good company. It's a unique business model. There was always doubts about, can they do what they did? I mean, we had a number of short stories on it, and they held that, went through and executed. So, kudos to them for that. But the multiples are huge, and assumes that there's one winner and they are the one. So there was always going to be a issue at some point where, the reality of earnings had to catch up. So these kind of things adds to the uncertainty, and market doesn't like uncertainty. So at the moment, market, you've got a fair amount of selling coming in. Now, the biggest worry is if the next update, they don't match expectations, this will get smacked. And that's what people are worried about. All of these things happen on the side and no one really panics. People are worried, but they don't panic. But if they miss earnings, this will get ugly. And when you have really high expectations, that's a worry.
Maybe you talk about perhaps the inaction of the board. Is this a problem with these founder-led companies in the control that they wield, and therefore perhaps you do run into these problems?
Yeah, we see this on a global level. When you've got founder-led companies, and founders, to their credit, they build businesses from scratch, and market loves them, and then investors fall in love with them, and then they start to lose perspective, and they do, not everyone, but some of them will do, a few mistakes. Now, that's where the board is supposed to keep them in track, and if they don't, and generally what we found is they tend not to. And if they don't, then they lead into trouble and things get in a bit patchy. And that's happened as quite a few times, and most of us know the historical track record of those things. So that's where we are. And I think, as it's kind of like the knife that cuts both ways. When they're executing well, the founder leads the charge and everyone follows, and you do really well. And when it starts to go wrong, boards struggle to control those kind of founders as well. So you live with the sword and you die with the sword.
Indeed. Mathan, always great to get your analysis from Deep Data Analytics. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Which brings us to our stock of the day. Well, it is another stock on the nose. And for analysis of Mineral Resources, well, was Mathan Somasundaram from Deep Data Analytics, and also Henry Jennings from Marcus Today.
If you're thinking long term, I would gradually buy like a bit every couple of weeks and accumulate it over time. So it's probably a good nibble stock because look, commodities are cyclicals. So you don't know where the bottom is, and eventually the cycle will turn. It's in pretty good commodities, and management's pretty good at pivoting. So I'd say this is probably one of the better diversified plays in that context.
The troubles come not in single spies, but in battalions. And at the moment, we have got battalions of troubles, and the iron ore price, the lithium price, and now we've got corporate governance issues as well. I really like this stock at $30. It got well and truly oversold, and it bounced big time from there. It was now down to $40. I think there's probably a little bit more downside because of this corporate governance issue, but I think around $35 value will start to present. But for now, I'd be, if you're a shareholder, this is a hold. If you're looking at fresh money, I think at $35 you start to accumulate this one.
Righto, so that was our stock of the day, Mineral Resource, and accumulate there from Mathan Somasundaram, and a hold from Henry, although he does see a point there when you start to accumulate that stock as well. All right, let's see where we're finishing up on this Monday with the market leaders there. Amotiv, the leader, they're up almost 10%. We're seeing the gold miners move heftily today. West African Resources among the best, along with Genesis. Also some movement among the uranium miners, including Boss Energy. On the downside, though, well, no surprise that those two stocks we've just been talking about, WiseTech and Mineral Resources, down more than 13%. The retailer Lovisa also hit today, along with Super Retail. Just in terms of the smaller stocks, Terramin is up 36%, and we're also seeing in the resources space a lot of movement there. Laboratories Resources and Berkeley Energia, as well as 29 Metals. Those silver stocks also on the move, along with gold. On the negative side, Energy Resources taking a tumble today, off more than 16%. Calix also being hit. Some of those lithium miners struggling, including Atlantic Lithium. All right, let's catch up on what's likely to watch for overnight at least. We do have the US Conference Board leading index. FOMC member speaks also, that is Logan, and also Neil Kashkari speaking as well, and we get the producer price index from Germany. Locally tomorrow, we get CSL will hold its virtual R&D Investor Day. Quarterly reports from Mirvac, Syrah Resources and Transurban. AGMs from Audinate, Magellan, Meteoric Resources, Suncorp and Transurban. And also across the ditch, we'll get the trade balance for September. So let's see where we're finished for the day. Pretty close to the session highs, up more than 0.8% on the CBOE 200, and similarly with the ASX, where we have finished 0.85% higher there, and as I mentioned there, all sectors higher. In fact, that's actually just come back. It's just settled lower. It's now up 0.75% on the ASX 200. All sectors higher, aside from tech, which was dragged lower by WiseTech. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll do it all again tomorrow.